Welcome everyone to another magical episode of the Tree of Geek. This week, Josh and Michael will take you on a journey across the cosmos through fantasy and imagination. Wow, that was interesting. Thank you for that intro, stranger off the street. Sometimes you got to help the homeless. You got to throw them a few coins. You know, they want to wash your windshield. They want to do an intro for you. Either way, it works. Josh, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great. And that homeless man talked louder than John usually does.
Oh, if that silence you just heard, that was John chiming in. I'm sorry. We love our friend John. We do. We love you, John. We hung out with John yesterday.
We did.
We had a guys thing yesterday with John and some guys, and it was fun. Went to the Mongolian place I'd never been to before.
And Barnes and Nobles.
Yeah, I've been there before.
Yeah.
Well, today we're going to have an episode on pretty much the broad spectrum of fantasy, kind of an intro to fantasy. We're going to be talking about movies and TV shows and books and the origins and comparisons to sci-fi and things down that alley. But before we get in there, let's talk about what is new in our world of geek. Josh, you go first.
Well, it is no surprise that I jumped right on the first trailer that came out for the new Superman movie.
I thought you were going to say I jumped on the first Reddit theory I could find.
About the new Superman movie. No.
I saw it as well.
At time of recording, the new Superman teaser trailer dropped. I watched it the whole way through. That is the only trailer I'm going to do my best to watch.
That's the only one I will watch.
And I have to admit, it looks a lot better than I originally anticipated.
Listen, I already gave you the list of the comic book movies I'm actually going to see in the theaters this year, which are like the only movies I'm going to see in the theater this year. You know, I got to stay away. I'm going to try my best in 2025 to stay away from trailers. What did you think of the Soups trailer? I am jonesed to the max for it.
It's your classic teaser where it jumped around a lot. But all in all, I mean, I feel like we got a pretty good feel for the tone and everything that James Gunn was going for.
It definitely has his fingerprints on it.
Oh, yeah. And like I said, I was, like a 6 out of 10 excited. I'm probably close to an 8 now. Like I might actually say, hey, let's go to theaters for this.
Well, I mean, July 11th, I'll be there.
I don't think I've ever gone to theaters for a Superman movie.
I have.
This might be the first.
Okay. Right on. What else you got?
Well, sticking with the movie trailers, I just saw one with Jenna Ortega and Paul Rudd. And I had no idea what it was going to be about. They were driving. She's like his daughter, it's weird how they can cast, like 22, 24-year-olds as like little kids, but whatever. And they hit
she's in college. Who knows?
Well, yeah. And they hit something and they get out and they look and they're like, it's a unicorn. Well, the movie's called Death of a Unicorn. From the trailer, it looks like a dark humor thriller.
I saw 15 seconds of it and then I quit.
That's why I'm not saying any more of what I saw. But all in all, it actually looks like it has potential to be really entertaining.
I look forward to it.
So I will probably watch that one as well. I love Paul Rudd and Emily Rudd, but no relation. You remember Emily Rudd, right?
One of the TV shows we watched this year.
One Piece.
She plays the redhead. Anything else?
Sticking with movies, more than a trailer, I watched the new movie Elevation with Anthony Mackie and Morena Baccarin. I give it like a 6.5 out of 10. It was one of those movies that while it was definitely entertaining, it was very cookie cutter and predictable. You said that you know nothing about it, correct?
No. Give me a premise that doesn't spoil anything in the movie. Like if this was on the back of a DVD box, what would it say?
Well, what I wrote down is probably less than the back of a DVD box.
Okay.
Creatures came out of the earth and in one very quick wave took out almost the entire planet's population.
You just told me half of the plot of the movie.
No, that happens before the movie.
Oh, that's in the
like, they don't even show that.
They just say it in words on the screen?
Yeah, basically. Okay. The survivors discover that these creatures can't go above 8,000 feet elevation.
Do you not know how to give a premise without giving the movie away? You're telling me movie.
This is all told in the titles. Like
okay, so the movie's about creatures that are on there and they have to survive. That's what that's it. That's all you got to say. Like oh my gosh, man, you're killing me.
That's literally all I have left.
Okay.
That's all I have.
You know what? We're done. Turn off the mics.
No,
podcast is canceled.
They explain that in literally the very beginning, and I mean like the little words flashing up in the beginning that for some reason they can't go above 8,000 feet. So what humanity is left lives above 8,000 feet, and they venture down for supplies if they need to. It's weird because throughout the whole movie, no matter where they're at, somebody took the time to draw a white line at 8,000 feet, like everywhere across apparently the entire world. I don't know. They always have a line to get past. I don't know. It is definitely a popcorn movie. Sit back, put it on.
Never heard of it.
I guess it was in theaters only, and then I think it went to streaming.
Was it in Sandusky, Ohio only? Is that why I've never heard of this movie?
I don't know. I think it was here. I don't know.
At the local cinema?
I don't know. It's Anthony Mackie, though. I mean, so.
Yeah, well, listen, if you go to some of these sites and see all the DVD, like DVDreleases.com, you're like, wait a minute. I didn't know that Bruce Willis just put out 15 movies. I had no idea.
True.
And this was like, I'm talking about like before he had the aphasia come out and stuff. It was like, man, dude, he's putting out a lot of movies I've never heard of before.
It's one of those movies, I would say, if you have time and you just don't know what you want to watch, check it out.
Well, it sounds like a horror sci-fi, so I have to watch it. So it'll be on my list for, is it a 2023 or 2024 movie?
24. Like I said, it just came out not long ago at all. It's definitely a sci-fi thriller. I don't know if I'd go as far as saying horror, but...
You said there's creatures.
Well, yeah, fair.
Do the creatures kill people?
Like almost everybody before the movie even starts.
Sounds like I need to watch it.
It reminded me a lot of A Quiet Place. How it's just like, here's everything that happened. Oh, now let's watch these survivors.
Gotcha.
It reminded me on that vibe a lot, except this, you could tell they tried to put a little more action into it with guns and stuff. And
what else you got? Do you have anything else to spoil for me?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, what do you got?
I started watching Creature Commandos.
Well, we're all caught up on the same episode, so you can't spoil it for me.
No, I lied. I've seen all of them.
Okay, well, it happens in episode 4. I've already saw a screen capture.
So my notes here for Creature Commandos is WTF. I love it.
It's amazing.
It is. So I started watching it at work today and very quickly realized this is not a work cartoon.
I like it better than the Suicide Squads.
Well, yeah, I do too. They reference the Suicide Squad briefly. Yeah. They reference Peacemaker. It's surprisingly really well done. And you were right when you told me before. I don't know if it was off mic or on the podcast, but it is a mature audience's...
It was through message, but yeah.
Yeah, it is definitely for mature audiences, but it's so good.
Yeah, definitely check it out. We both strongly recommend this show.
Yes, I'm thoroughly impressed with James Gunn's work on it. And like you had said, for a fact off mic, it has his fingerprints all over it. Like, you can tell it's a James Gunn piece.
G.I. Robot and The Bride of Frankenstein. Those two characters are just wow.
Well, and they give the backstories.
Yeah, it seems like each member's getting their own kind of episode. Yeah,
so far, each episode, it has the main story, but then has like a little flashback to give us some backstory. And they haven't disappointed on any of them yet. Like, every one is a very well-rounded story.
Is like, I've known some of these characters have existed in DC Comics, but I didn't know anything about them.
Okay.
I'm like, oh, well, so now I'm getting that.
Well, that's like Phosphorus. Until I looked it up, I didn't know that was voiced by Alan Tudyk. And now that I know that, that's all I can hear is Alan Tudyk.
It's great. Fantastic.
But that's really all I've got from my new and geek.
Okay.
What about yourself?
Oh, I got a couple things. Or this is going to be like an hour of the podcast. So here we go. All right,
moving on.
I got a couple things. Let's start off with, I saw Heretic the other day. Hugh Grant, amazing. Good horror movie. Check it out, A24. Kind of slow at times, but great dialogue. I finished Smile 2 today. Not as good as Smile 1. Still, that creature is kind of wicked. I finished up 1996's horror movies. Scream, nothing dethroned it. It's still the number 1 from 96. You were mentioned the Superman trailer. It's amazing. Definitely going to go see it. This week is the finale of What We Do in the Shadows TV show. I'm very sad. I've not got to see the finale yet. I've been, it's the holiday season, a lot of busy stuff going on, but I'm very sad.
I haven't started season 6 yet. I wanted to wait till it was completely done and enjoy it in one shot.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely going to be sad to see all of them go.
Yeah, I mean, I don't believe this season matches up to some of the other ones, but I'm hoping the finale really makes up for it.
They should finish it off with a movie.
That'd be nice.
To rival the original movie.
It'd probably be better. Speaking of movies that could be better or worse, Craven apparently is bombing super, or what did I say before this? It's made like 28 million worldwide. Like, that's it.
Yeah, put in that perspective, that is lower than Madam Web.
Yeah, it's really bad.
That's lower than Venom 3. That's not lower than Terrifier 3.
Not good. Well, yeah, but Terrifier 3, yeah, like, you look at budget versus what they've made. WWE, for all you wrestling fans out there, is now officially on Netflix. It has started. I saw a couple clips, but I haven't seen like a full episode or anything. I do have Netflix, so it's not like I can't watch wrestling now. I might check it out when I'm bored one of these days at work or something.
Do they do that live?
I don't know. I don't know how they're going to do it. I don't know. I'm waiting for my Netflix subscription to go flying upwards because of wrestling. I don't know if it will or not.
I know the Jake Paul Mike Tyson fight they did live.
Yeah,
but
glitch after glitch after glitch. That was fun. I'm almost midway through my chapter 4 of my fantasy book. I believe you've done all the way up to chapter 20.
Yes,
you're doing great.
I'm nearing the end of chapter 21, though I've hit a little bit of a roadblock, not like a writer's block, but I just don't have the time right now.
It's holiday season.
Yeah, things are
I'm blaming everything on the holiday season right now. I'm blaming my gut. I'm blaming my writing. I'm blaming everything on the holiday season. Thank you very much, Santa Claus. He's real, guys. Check it out.
Jack Black.
There. Yeah. Yeah, spell it properly. And finally, before we get into this, we sit here on this podcast like, man, I wish somebody would finally talk to us, like interact on Instagram, on Facebook, on X, whatever it may be, on YouTube comments somewhere. Well, somebody didn't do any of those, but somebody did send us an email. We did receive an email from a guy called RNA. He lives out west. He said that he had listened to our recent episode before the one that came out before this one on our favorite sci-fi. It was franchises, but somehow we named it sci-fi universes. I guess they're very similar.
Yeah.
It is what it is. We're running out of clever names for things. They can't all be monsters in your pocket. But RNA says that he really enjoyed the episode. He did say in the email that co-host John needs to give back his Star Wars fan card.
Oh.
Yeah, he shot off some missiles there. Yeah.
That hurts.
He said that he did hear of Sword Art Online. It was not unfamiliar to him. However, he didn't agree with that. But he didn't completely agree with our lists either. But he did send his top 5. And I will go from bottom up. His bottom was Alien Predator Universe. So he merged them together like I did. So shout out for that.
I refuse to accept that.
They were filmed together. We did things on AVP. Okay. Number 4 was Star Trek. He said that he liked the exploration of Star Trek. Then he went with number 3 was Terminator. One that didn't make our list. It was an honorable mention.
It was a very, very close, like number 6 on my list.
Yeah. So Terminator, he said he liked the obviously Schwarzenegger taking everybody out. He liked seeing all the different Terminators and things. He did say for Alien versus Predator in his message that he doesn't hate Resurrection like I do. He understands that it's not great, but he still enjoy it. And he still does have a little bit of love for 3. So he's a fan of the franchise, which is good. And speaking of fan cards, coming in at number 2, he gave to Star Wars. I mean, why not? I mean, it's Star Wars, but he really enjoyed the Jedi. He likes the magical mixing in with the galaxy and the politicalness of it and things like that.
So what was number 1?
The MCU.
Okay.
He is a big fan of Hulk, and he finally got to see Hulk on screen, not watered down like in the Ang Lee movie, even though I enjoyed that movie. I don't know if he did or not. But he said he was a fan of comic books ever since he was a little kid, and to finally see a lot of those characters get translated from paper to screen was really great. He says that they mostly have done a really good job, so that was his top 5. I appreciate you sending your list out. Thank you for taking the time. I greatly appreciate it, and feel like sending us some more emails in the future. Tell us where we're right or wrong and what your take is on things.
Yeah, absolutely. You can email us at geeksinattree@gmail.com. Or if you're my friend Eric, he just messages me directly on Facebook Messenger to let me know that my list is wrong. Eric.
Did he give you his list?
Not for this. It was for a while back. Okay. But now,
well, tell us, Eric, what is your list?
Yeah, I'd like to hear it. No, I appreciate it, though. At least I know I can always guarantee it. Like within a day or 2 of release, he's going to message me about something.
Yeah.
And I'm all right with that.
Sounds good with dedication.
And I'm all right with that because it's a fun little way to keep our friendship going. Because, sometimes they can get stale and you cannot talk for a long time. And, hey, it's fun.
Stupendous is a word that some people use to describe those type of feelings you feel inside.
Stupendous.
Yeah. The stupendous feeling. They're like, yeah, oh, it's so warm and fuzzy. It's the holiday season, right? My emotions are all out of whack. So let's get to the fucking meat and potatoes of this, okay? Let's talk about fantasy. Now, our whole entire this season, for the most part, is going. I mean, we're going to throw out some different things here and there, but mostly it's going to be fantasy. Last season was kind of sci-fi with a couple different things thrown in. This one we're going to kind of lean towards fantasy. So we thought, and this was kind of your idea. You're the one that kind of took the lead on this one. Let's give kind of an intro to fantasy. Now, obviously, people probably know what Lord of the Rings is, but there's more to fantasy than Lord of the Rings. So we thought we'd just take a full episode and just kind of describe our experiences with fantasy, give some examples, where it comes from, yada, yada, yada. So let's get into it, Josh. Tell me, just broadly, what is fantasy? What is the fantasy genre?
All right, so the fantasy genre is a style of storytelling that really transports the audience, be it a reader, a viewer, whatever the medium is, to a whole nother world. But unlike sci-fi, where you usually have science with fiction, fantasy takes you into a world that really expands on the imagination. It focuses on things like magic and mythical creatures, enchanted realms, and going on epic quests. It's where we get the hero's quest. We'll talk about that again later. It really explores the themes of like being a hero and morality and having your values and sticking to your values.
Sounds like metal music.
Yeah.
Rising above, man.
And it almost always it focuses on a solid battle between good and evil. I know most mediums do, but fantasy is practically based on that.
Well, I think we'll talk about a few Dark Lords at some point in this episode that really, white wizards.
Yeah.
Come on.
The biggest thing to take away is that it really tries to stretch the human imagination. And like you said, when most people think of fantasy, they immediately go to Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones.
But they forget about Chronicles of Narnia.
Yeah.
And, well, you say Game of Thrones, it's, A Song of Ice and Fire.
Well, right.
And then, you got like the Wheel of Time, there's Conan, Beastmaster.
I have a whole list on here for...
Yeah. But we'll jump into a lot of them eventually. But, like, let's talk about what defines the fantasy genre. Like, what is the limits of pure fantasy and what separates it from science fiction, or, as most people just call it, sci-fi?
So when you compare fantasy and sci-fi, one of the biggest comparisons you can make, like as far as how they're different, is usually the themes. Sci-fi is almost always rooted in some type of scientific principles or using futuristic technologies or aliens, or sometimes it's like a feasible type of advancement in technology, like an upgrade. Whereas fantasy relies on the unexplained, magic,
mythology,
mythical creatures, supernatural elements even.
A lot of medieval settings.
Yeah. Well, and I think they always pick the medieval settings mostly just because there's no technology there at all. And when we talk technology, it's almost always like electrical driven technology.
Yeah, but if you look at something like Shadow and Bone, I think it's called, where it's kind of set in it's not steampunk, but it's like a Victorian type area. There's like steam stuff going on, right, but there is magic as well. So sometimes you'll find a book or a series that'll kind of push up the timeline a little bit. I know there's some out there, there's Western fantasy, but that still has like the steam era, like steam technology. But yeah, the electricity is definitely, I think, one of the boundaries that it's not like you can't have lightning or anything, but it's like once you start using, electrical things, electricity to power stuff, that's when you're like, okay, it kind of brings it more based into reality.
Right. But I think the fine line really is when the main premise or the main issue is based around any type of technology or any type of, I hate saying electricity, but it's really where it's at. Yeah.
A lot of the quests, you'll have to find some magical artifact.
Yeah.
You don't have to go find a diehard battery.
Or sometimes it's even simpler, like a cure. Go find this flower out in, the middle of the jungle.
The elixir of life.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
What else? What else differs sci-fi from fantasy?
I think another thing that kind of separates it is just like the travel as well. Like, is it on a planet? Is it off a planet? You think about things like space travel, wormholes, robotics, cybernetics, things like that really take it apart. I mean, obviously in Dungeons and Dragons, you can have something like a Warforged. It's a robot, but it's still a magical robot.
If you look at
in a way,
base D&D, it's straight up like medieval style fantasy.
Right.
So yeah, I understand what you're saying though, John.
John's always a Warforged, man.
He is.
Always a Warforged.
Actually,
yeah, space travel is one thing. Are you off the planet? Are you living on other planets? And are you using phasers and things?
Technology.
Yeah.
So that kind of segues right into my next point of the setting. Is it in a futuristic setting? Is it in space? Is there advanced technology, or are you looking at it, like we said, a medieval or like an ancient environment with castles and forests, or the classic enchanted forest? Or
is there things in the world that can be that are unexplained? If you have a story and you have some sort of boon, I guess is what you would call it, is that thing able to be explained by magic, or is it explained by technology? And I think that'll help differentiate. What are they going to get for the quest? What are they using in the quest? Where is the quest at? Is it technology based or is it not? And by technology, we obviously mean like microchips and televisions and cars and things of that nature. But then you kind of get to the idea of, you start asking the questions about certain movies and certain book series where you get the overlap in hybrids with science fantasy and space fantasy. So we're talking, Harry Potter and Star Wars, because Harry Potter is in half of a world where we live, and then it's in another world where it's all magic, but yet technology jumps over occasionally like a flying car. But then you got Star Wars where you have space wizards with lightsabers in their hands battling, but yet somehow they're using a magical force through the universe. But they're still using space vehicles to jump to hyperspeed to go through their lanes and do things in so many parsecs. So that's when you get in an argument sometimes. Well, is this fantasy or is this a sci-fi movie? I generally put Harry Potter in more fantasy because the majority of the story has to do with fantasy. They're wizards with wands, saying spells, doing magic. Star Wars, I would put more in sci-fi because the Millennium Falcon is a space vehicle. They use lightsabers that have crystals and little microchip shit in them that makes it work.
So it seems like one of the deciding factors is, did a main point of the show have to be invented, or is it a like natural or unexplained system?
Yeah, like the Death Star is a technological,
it had to be built
piece of destruction.
Well, so
how would you put the two, Harry Potter and Star Wars? Where would you place them?
Honestly, I do the same thing. Harry Potter to me has always been more of the fantasy base because it's based around the magical aspect. Yes, it takes place in both worlds, but the majority of it takes place in the wizarding world. The majority of it focuses on the wizarding world where there is no real technology.
At least they have flushing toilets. I'll give them that.
Magically flushing toilets. Whereas Star Wars, Star Trek, all of those, well, I guess Star Wars is what we're talking about in this case. Yeah, I mean, it is technically space wizards with, plasma swords or whatever you want to call it, but
the only thing in Star Trek that I would even kind of push towards fantasy is there's been a random couple episodes that dealt with more divine beings. Now, I'm not talking about Q. I'm talking about like they looked for the race, the progenitors that started all of humanity. Like all the races are looking for these people, and they still have their ideas of heaven and hell and Valhalla and all these different versions. All these races have them. But that is more of a spiritual divine thing. Even in Stargate, they had the wannabe angel people that were way up high, where Daniel Jackson, he dies and then he becomes one of them things. But that's more of a divine thing more than, now I guess in mythology you do have gods and goddesses, but they use like some unseen forces and they had create hydras and stuff where like even in Star Wars you have creatures the same, like you can have dragons in Game of Thrones and you have a Rancor in Star Wars, but a Rancor is actually like you can trace them. I don't know. It's I guess I'm not really driving to point. What I'm trying to say is like one is more actually biologically based and the other one is not. and like one's more divine based, the other one's more magic. Like, because I think there is a even with magic and divine, I think there's a separation there, because I don't know, one's more belief, and you can believe in certain ways how it works, and the other one's like, well, we don't really know. He just waves his hands and shit happens, but he doesn't claim to be a god. He claims it to be magic. So, you know, sometimes there are a lot of stories that are really hard to separate, but that's what's great about the medium, is that you can mix all the things together. Anything you gotta say on the matter? On my muddled mess of what I just said.
Well, and part of it too, like you were saying, like the rancor and stuff like that, I do think the creatures involved can really tell you what genre you're looking at as well.
Yeah, is it a basilisk,
well, like,
or is it a Klingon?
Sci-fi often deals with, you know, aliens and AI and, you know, whatever else, astronauts. Fantasy always focuses on things like wizards and elves and dragons,
gnomes,
you know, knights, just mythical beings
chivalry
in general. I think that plays a huge part in it.
I agree. So now that we know, or we've talked about what we think defines, like, where is kind of the line there? Because I think Star Wars and Harry Potter, like I said, I think those are the ones that are in the middle. Like, anything on the left or the right or above or below those kind of like goes the other directions. So we've been talking about like what fantasy is and how you define it, but like, where did fantasy come from? The fantasy genre that we get all these glorious movies and TV shows and books from, where did it start from? Like, where is the beginning?
Where is it?
Well, I think by your notes.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if you
No, I think our notes are actually pretty similar on it. I have, you know, I think it starts with ancient myths, you know, with mythology and even some old biblical type things, even though the Bible, you know, the word wasn't there yet. But, you know, the Epic of Gilgamesh, I think, is one of the very, very first things where it starts. You know, one of the earliest known works of literature, you know, dating back to ancient Mesopotamia, you know, features a mythological version of the king, you know, and life of Gilgamesh and the whole story of the battle that he has to go through.
Right. Well, I mean, it took that what, Greek and Norse mythology and kind of they merged it, and it really showed like the blending of human struggle with the supernatural elements. I think that's where could you say birth took place? Like
creation, you know,
it was when someone took their imagination and went outside of just telling a new story, and they started mixing things together that before this never should have been mixed.
Yeah, like just think about the first time somebody dug up a pterodactyl or something like that and went, oh my God, what is this? Your imagination starts going. You start hearing all these other fantastical stories. You start mixing things. You're like, I'm going to call this a dragon. That's what that is. It's a dragon. Now, I'm not here to say dragons existed or did not exist in pre-time. I know some people believe that dinosaurs didn't even exist. And that's your opinion. I mean, you take the facts how they are and you digest them how they are. I'm going to say dinosaurs did exist, and I'm going to say that they might have been mistaken for dragons. And I think when we don't know something and our mind starts going into those dark places where we're trying to figure things out, I think we come up with stories and we try to explain the things so they're not as scary. And coming up with something like a dragon or a phoenix or a thunderbird is one of those ways to not only get fear out of us, but also to create parables and fables and things to teach lessons. And storytelling's amazing. It is one of the greatest things I think humans have ever
absolutely
done. If there's other aliens out there, I'm sure they have stories as well.
Well, and that's why things like The Lord of the Rings or The Chronicles of Narnia, or in more modern times, The Song of Ice and Fire, that's why those stories became so popular, was because not only were you using your imagination, but they built an entire fleshed out world in their head and then put it on paper so detailed that that story comes alive in your head to the point where
you're watching. You have to, when you're writing something, you have to make a movie for somebody in their head.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to, if what I do when I'm writing, and I know I'm certainly no Tolkien, whenever I see a scene.
Well, you're not British, so, you know, it's the only thing I see that's different.
Well, and I'm alive. But whenever I see a scene in my head, I try and describe it as best I can so that you reading it are going to see the same thing that I do.
What do you see through the camera lens?
Right.
Yeah.
Which, total rabbit trail, I just found this out the other day. Did you know that there's two different types of thinkers, visual and non-visual?
I think there's probably more than that.
Well, in the sense that, like,
give me what you got.
Talking to my brother, I even said, like, you know, if you think of, you know, I forget the example I used exactly. Let's just say his house. I said, I can picture it in my head. I can see what it would look like if you painted it, or if you added a reef, or if, all this stuff. And he was like, no, he's like, I can't do that. I just have to actually look at it and figure out where I would put something. He can't put a visual picture in his head, he said.
That's interesting.
Which I think is one of the reasons why I've always been more creative than him. I'm not trying to sound rude, but it's true. And why he is a programmer and really good at it.
Ones and zeros.
Yeah. And I was talking to my wife today, and she's pretty sure she's the same way. As she's reading a story, that's when she's seeing it in her head, but she's not actually seeing it. She's seeing the words and understanding what's happening based on that. I'm like, I'm not going to lie to you. That sounds like a horrible way to read a book.
Thank you for being honest. Just saying. I'm going to break you and the world eventually of this habit.
I'm going to break you of saying,
everybody says, you can break the whole world too. But, but we can move on and talk about, like, let's not forget, like, the Indian epics. And I want to make sure that we shout out everybody here briefly because, yeah, we've hit the big ones, but nobody really thinks about, like, the Indian culture, the Ramayana, and all the fantastical elements they have there. You have your Beowulf. We can't forget about Beowulf. We can't forget about King Arthur. Like, that was one of the huge things at the beginning. I mean, these are like a long fucking time ago. You get into the Renaissance and you get like Grimm fairy tales, all those German folk tales that are kind of collected together. They were, later done by George MacDonald. He brought them all together.
And then ruined by Disney.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's that one with Gemma Atherton, though. It's kind of like a horror version of it. It's too bad of a movie. You get the Fairy Queen by Edmund Spenser. I mean, that was pretty big and important. And then you started getting into your Tolkiens and your C.S. Lewis's. And C.S. Lewis, for me, was big. Let me ask you this. When you were a child, what fantasy stuff did you gravitate toward? What were the books or movies that you gravitated towards? For me, it was Narnia, it was Conan, it was Beastmaster, those type of things. And my mom and I watched the animated Hobbit movie a lot, and those ones. What was that? Rankin Bass, I think, did those. What was your childhood fantasy stuff? And I know your childhood was a little bit different than mine. You're a little bit more sheltered, or maybe not sheltered, but they're like, I think your family was like, no, maybe a little bit more than mine did.
VeggieTales.
Hey man, they were pirates going up on the seas. I didn't watch it, but I saw a box cover.
No, so for me, like, I guess the big fantasy aspect would have been
Princess Bride.
I did love Princess Bride. The Neverending Story.
Oh,
do you remember that?
I'm gonna betray you, man.
That was one of, I want to say, probably my early exposures to the whole idea of like full on fantasy, as well as, like cartoons and stuff like the Fairly Odd Parents and, stuff like that. That's just like kind of magic based.
Did you ever watch King Arthur and the Knights of Justice?
No.
It's about King Arthur and his knights get frozen, and the wizard Merlin needs new champions. So he does this spell through time, and there's a bus of high school football team. They're like the best state champions or something. And he brings them back into King Arthur times and makes them the Knights of Justice.
Oh, wow.
And yeah. And they have like these cool armor, and the swords come out of the armor, and they had like these cool catapults and stuff. Yeah. And it was pretty cool.
See, I remember it was called A Kid in King Arthur's Court.
Yeah, it's a good movie.
It was, I think, a baseball player or something like that went back in time.
Yeah. There was a lot of kids sports movies being made around that time. Oh, it was like one of those same kids. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I leaned more into. I didn't even discover The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings till I was in high school.
When I was being babysat, in the summertime, it was roughly, I'm going to say when I was like 7-ish, I watched the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe cartoon over and over and over. And I told the story before about how I went from school. I moved around a lot. So from school to school to school, I had to keep writing all these reports. Well, I kept doing it on the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe because, like, why not?
Just erase the date.
Pretty much did the same report like 4 times. It worked. It was fun. Yeah, I cheated. That's right.
I don't really think that's cheating.
It was a new school. It's a new game. It's a new season, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why not? Why not do your old same tricks? What about modern fantasy? Now that we've talked about where it comes from and where it's at now, what is like the 1, 2, and 3? Like, where's your go-to now? Like your big fantasy now?
Big fantasy
like
now?
Modern fantasy. Like the stuff that's come out in the last, 50 years. That's not Lord of the Rings.
Well, then I got nothing.
Well, we talked about A Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones. Is there anything else? Like I started getting into the Wheel of Time. What about like anything for you? Because you're a big book reader.
Well, I don't know if I can like name off a very specific, movie or something, but I've always been just fascinated with the whole, the idea and the visual portrayal of like magic and stuff on screen. Like there was a movie, wow, I don't know, early 2000s now, called The Covenant.
Oh,
Do you
it's
remember that?
yeah.
Where, like, they're
they were like
warlocks
in
and like
Massachusetts.
yeah, and like
Yeah.
you use magic, but it pulls off your life force and you get older. And
Yeah, it was shot in a very dark grayish blue.
yeah,
I saw it in theaters.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay. See, I thought it was a fantastic movie.
I liked it.
The whole concept of how every type of magic you see in movies and stuff, there's always a different like set of rules to it.
Yeah, it drew from like the Salem witch trials to like that,
Yeah.
the 2000s modern time.
See, you have that,
Yeah.
but then you turn around and like the Dresden Files, which they did a one season, I think Sci-Fi did it. It wasn't amazing. But the books, there's like, I think 22 books. And they're phenomenal. And they play on the same idea of like you draw off of yourself for your magic, but it's not like you're taking years off your life. No, you can get exhausted. It's like you're exerting yourself in any other, activity. But then you turn around again, and over here's Harry Potter
Yeah, that's a newer one.
rocking out, unlimited magic as long as you have a wand.
Yeah. Oh, you have Agatha and Doctor Strange. They've been pretty popular lately.
Yeah.
If you look at like they had on TV, Emily watched all of the Sabrina Teenage Witch, the newest one.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That wasn't too bad.
Yep. The Magicians.
The Magicians. How we cannot talk about fantasy without right there. There's another story. Right, it's told in our time. There is a magical school. There is a magical world, but they split like time in between.
Technology.
Yeah, there is technology. Like people are using guns.
Yeah.
But
They even say at one point, like, technology screws up. I mean, yeah, it screws up when it's around magic. Like, I think they mentioned at one point in the show, like, phones and stuff can fry if it's around magic too much.
I think we've talked about this before. I think we talked about it on the dark side of the tree.
Probably.
Where we talked about kind of where magic comes from, where we would think about if we wrote a story or where we've seen in other stories, we talk about like different frequencies and different pools to draw from. And I think if it is, and I know there's the argument that once you explain magic, so let's talk about this real quick because I saw this. If you do explain magic, where it come from and how it used it, how the characters use it, is it now just science?
Oh,
Because now, you've said, well, it works A, B, and C, but if D's included, then it does this.
So it's like Thor said in the first Thor movie that magic is just science you don't understand yet.
Right. Do you agree with that?
Oh.
Like for my story, and I explained to you, I'm not going to say it here on mic, but I explained to you where I think the magic comes from and how it's used. And then I saw like 2 weeks later this argument on YouTube or TikTok or wherever the heck it was.
Just means that your phone was listening.
Yeah, probably.
Stupid technology.
And I thought to myself, well, now I guess I scientifically explained it. But just because I think where it comes from, you still not everybody can still manipulate that type of energy. You know what I mean? What's your take on all this?
Well, I don't know if I have one because you're reading my story.
Correct.
Is that sci-fi or is that fantasy?
I think it's more sci-fi.
Why?
Radiation.
But it's like the Force. It's just there.
I think the difference for me is on our Earth, radiation and the different forms of radiation have been studied. They have been shown. They've been used.
But it's not something.
Let me finish here. But if you talk about the Force, or even a story where there's a magical frequency that some people can touch and not touch, like we're saying hypothetically, string theory is right. You pluck the strings. It's a different universe. It's a different reality, but that's never scientifically been proven to our standards.
Right.
Whereas radiation has. So I can't say the Force is completely science-based. Now, if George Lucas, whoever's in charge at that time, says, okay, well, listen, the Force is midichlorians, then now it's science-based because in their universe, they're like, yes, you can get it underneath the microscope. Now, in our universe, no, midichlorians don't exist.
So you're saying there has to be an air of mystery behind it.
Yes, if there's still an air of mystery, like, yeah, okay, this energy exists supposedly, but I can't read it, I can't touch it, I can't form it, but this person over here can just make fire out of nowhere from it. But he's not using a scientific technology-based way of doing it. He's just flicking his fingers or blinking his eyes and it's happening. It's, with radiation, like, I can't just manipulate radiation.
So were the X-Men Sci-fi or fantasy based?
They're science because of the X gene and the radiation and things. Yeah, it's science.
But nobody created it. It's just there.
That's the argument, isn't it? That's the wonderful part about it.
I guess I would have to agree with you. Like once you fully understand something and you can replicate it on command with, and
that there's I think it's Sanderson in one of his books. He has where they have pieces of metal, and if you eat certain pieces of metal, you gain different powers. I haven't read it. It's just what I understand of it. So to me, he says that's how I've explained my magical system. But to me, that just means you're taking on the properties of that metal that's interacting in your biological chemistry, making you be able to do things. To me, that's more science-based than it is magic. But why can't it be both? Why can't it be biological magic? Who knows?
I don't know. So let me ask you something then.
Okay.
Why do you think fantasy is just so popular?
Because of your imagination. It takes you to places. Now, granted, and it's the same as sci-fi. I think it's the same for both, where we don't have to compare what's the difference is between the two. You can take yourself out of the room that we're sitting in right now, out of these seats, out of these headphones, and close your eyes and you're floating through the air. And all of a sudden you got wings and you got a cool sword in your hand, or, you're I don't know, you're blowing fireballs out of your butt. I don't know, but you are now taken to a world that does not exist. A world where things are different. If you're kicked and oppressed, or maybe got some inner need to hurt people, you can fantasize a world where that can happen. That's what's amazing about fantasy and sci-fi and about stories at all, because it's not reality. It's the same as video games. It takes you to a place. Now, granted, video games are made by somebody else and you're in their world, but I think that's why. It takes you out of reality.
So it's an escape from the real world.
Yes, escapism.
And you can just kind of immerse yourself in the endless possibilities of imagination.
Yeah, which takes you to people's world building or your own world building. And you and I are both huge fans of world building.
Yes,
very
much so.
Like I don't, obviously, as they said in the ERB, I don't need to know the history of every tree branch, the family history of it, but like it does nice to know, well, what is the name of the kingdom? When was the kingdom formed? There was an interview one time with George R. R. Martin where he said, listen, I think Tolkien did some great stuff. Those books are amazing. And I'm glad Aragon took over the kingdom, but what's his tax policy? What's his policy on immigration? Like, what's going on here? Like, what's going on? So you get Game of Thrones, and like there's so much political stuff in there.
Lord, yeah.
And I think that's great because he built his world a whole different way. Tolkien and him saw things completely differently, but yet somehow similar, and they have both amazing built worlds.
George R. R. Martin added the big battles and stuff, but a lot of his stories were driven by the backstabbing politics and the manipulation of people.
Yeah,
Tolkien was just straightforward good versus evil.
Yeah. Well, it was cool because you had Tolkien he was in the war, and he draws inspiration from the big machines of war and seeing the death and destruction. And then you have Martin, who looks at, ancient stuff like the Tudors and the War of the Roses and draws inspiration from there, which is another cool thing about storytelling is you draw inspiration from what's around you, what's in the public at the time, what's the big story, how is the world touching you at the moment, and you draw on all those things and you put it into your story.
Right.
What else do you think's popular?
Why do I think it's still so popular?
Yeah. Like, why is it? Because some genres are very niche.
Oh, yeah.
For fantasy, it may flop at the box office over a couple of years, but it always seems to come back. Why?
Yeah. I think it's the flexibility. Like, most things have limits. Like you were saying, think of sci-fi for a second. There are certain limits to what you can do, and it's always technology based. You've got to be, I hate to say it, but almost realistic.
Well, you got to fix that deflector disc. You don't fix a deflector disc, man, it ain't gonna happen.
But I mean, in fantasy, there's no boundaries like that. You can stretch it as far as you want. If you want that dog to suddenly morph into a cat, so be it.
Yeah, and you don't really have to explain it.
You don't have to explain it. You just say, "Oh, that's a polymorph animal."
Oh, it's a polymorph. Well, it's just a changing creature. That's all you got to say.
Or
or
what would John say? It's a mimic.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to explain it. You don't have to be tied down to the logistics of, well, how did this happen? Doesn't matter. So your imagination can just run wild.
Yeah, things exist just because they exist. You don't have to explain how things got there. They just are there.
Right.
How did this Dark Lord appear? Or how did the Chosen One be born? It doesn't matter. They're there. And what they can do is just endless creativity.
Now, I do
on
think,
the writer's part.
Unfortunately, I think right now we're coming into another slump in fantasy where things tend to go back and forth. Like you said, like, sci-fi, fantasy, horror, like different things always have the better of the year.
It's like those old stereos where you could mess with the equalizers.
EQs, yeah.
You had my mom's had 13 different sliders you can mess around with.
Well, I think fantasy is being pushed down right now. I see a lot more sci-fi.
I have
lately.
a theory.
Look at Apple TV. We just said this all of last year. They are demolishing the sci-fi realm. Like, they're doing amazing with it.
Yeah, they're killing the competition for sure.
The only fantasy we really got to see was Lord of the Rings and I think Wheel of Time.
I think the reason it's kind of going into a slump right now, with any genre, is you get a couple big hits that they're in the zeitgeist now. Everybody's dressing up as them. The merchandise is flying off the shelves. And then you get the 5 million imitators. Now, I'm not just talking about the movies that go straight to streaming or straight to Rent-A-Center, or not Rent-A-Center, but Blockbuster. Wow. Back to the day. They're in Rent-A-Center, they got some problems. But you always get an imitation. Remember when Harry Potter started, it'd been out for a while, but then the movie hit and it was super popular. All of a sudden, you had all these rip-off Harry Potter books everywhere.
Well, I think the best example would be Hunger Games. You had Hunger Games, then you had The Maze Runner, then you had
Divergent.
Then
what's the one with the memory? You couldn't. They had Jeff Bridges is in it. He's the memory keeper or something.
I know what you mean, but I can't. Think of the
just
name.
This year they had one that we saw a trailer for on Netflix or something. And was absolutely now. It's called the pretty people or the ugly people or something, where society only advances the pretty people. If you're not good looking enough, you don't. It was but it was like those Divergent movies.
Yeah,
it was like those the YA. But yeah, you get the billion imitators where it's just the same thing over and over. Remember when Star Wars came out? Then you get even Star Trek. They tried to ride the heels. Battlestar Galactica. All these different Battle Beyond the Stars, and they weren't the original. You could tell they were copies. And it's imitation's good and all, but if you don't come up with some uniqueness, it sucks. And I think that's why we're going through kind of a slump right now. I think you had Lord of the Rings hit the theaters and it was really big. Game of Thrones hit the TV. It was still pretty big. But then, Wheel of Time's good, but it definitely didn't get the reviews that the other ones got. It hasn't got the popular fanfare behind it. I'm sure Wheel of Time, there's a lot of books and a lot of fans, but it's not at the levels of Martin or Tolkien. It's not there.
Right.
I can mention in conversations and people know what the fuck I'm talking about.
For all you know, 50 years from now, it could explode and be the biggest franchise out there. Only people who love to read knew about Lord of the Rings for 60 years. Well, I guess 40 until around the 80s or so. Or when did the cartoon release? 70s, 80s?
I don't know when it actually released,
but it wasn't
probably around there.
It wasn't that big. It was when Peter Jackson took on the project, and come on, he knocked it out of the park. That it's a household name. Everybody knows who Frodo is.
Yeah. Well, then you have movies like Willow. Lucas wanted to do Lord of the Rings. He couldn't make it happen. We got Willow with Howard doing it instead.
Yeah.
I love the movie, but it didn't get that fan. It became cult status.
Yeah.
Beastmaster never got where it wanted to. You had Conan that was really good, but then you got the Beastmasters and the Red Sonjas after it
Well, the problem is, look at Aragon. You get one shot, and if you mess that one shot up, you're done.
Yeah, luckily Dungeons and Dragons got a second chance years later.
But in the case of Dungeons and Dragons, I know a lot of people were really skeptical. Then they saw the trailer and they were still maybe, because they remember what they did.
Another Hugh Grant joint. I'm just saying,
then.
Hugh Grant's killing it these days.
Man, him and Chris Pine, they just demolished that movie. They did so good. Oh, actually, everybody in that movie did really good.
Oh yeah, it was good.
But
top to bottom.
Normally, a franchise gets one shot until you got to wait a heck of a long time to reboot it and give it another go. But then you get the occasional blockbuster that just blows up, and there you go.
Yeah, and then you get all the imitators afterwards. But why are the blockbusters so good? What are the timeless themes that make a good, great, amazing fantasy genre movie or TV show or book? Like, what just makes it a good franchise, a good story?
Well, I think what gives it life is the fandom. I think that, you get your followers and your loyalists.
But what gets
And
the fandoms to be fans to begin with is what I'm saying. Like, what
relatable
themes?
characters, or in fantasy base, oftentimes it's the incredible ease of access to put yourself into that hero's position.
So relatability and growth.
Yes.
We're talking about, like you said, the character development and like the moral lessons you learn from it, right? But then you also have like timeless themes like good versus evil. You have the quest and the adventure, like those type of themes. You got to get the good and evil versus, like, the villain has to be good. The hero has to be good. They got to be relatable. They got to be fun to watch.
Yeah.
You got to put yourself in their shoes. The quest has to be fun. It can't just be, oh, they're going into a dungeon to get a dragon, to get an artifact.
Well, and the best villains and heroes that you can have are the ones that you, like you said, you blatantly relate to. Like, if you can sympathize with the villain, he or she was written correctly. You got to be able to understand their point of view, but also understand that they're going to the extreme in most cases.
On our way to the guys' trip yesterday, I was talking to Joe in the car about my book.
I thought you said he didn't talk at all.
He did in the car. He's got to break the ice a little with him. He's got to melt it a little bit. We were talking about the book, and I said that I ran into an issue with my villain. I was like, oh shit, where do I go? Who or what is the villain of this story? And I was like, well, I eventually figured it out. And he goes, well, I heard that if you just take the time to write a small little biography or small little snippet from their point of view of who they are and why they're the hero of their story.
Oh.
And then once you've got that done, you can write them better because now you understand them better.
So you're not writing it to put it in the book. You're writing it for yourself to
like,
understand the character.
Right. Like write just a very short story of who is the villain? Where did they come from? Where did they grow up? What has happened to them? Like what was their own little adventure where they thought they were the hero of the story? And then that makes them, helps you find a character that's more relatable.
Well, Joe is a wise man because that is, I'm going to try that.
I was like, that's what I said. That was exactly what I said. I need to go home and I need to take the bad guy-ish thing I got. And I got to, go, okay, where are they coming from?
I feel like I have a good grasp on the bad people in my story, but I might do that anyways, just to.
It might give them like a little unique.
Just give a little more depth to them, really. Yeah. That's a great.
I love Joe. Thanks, Joe.
Yeah.
Shout out to you.
Anybody listening, if you have advice like that you want to throw out there, like
any aspiring writers or professional writers?
Yeah, okay.
Hey, you don't know.
Like little quirks that, like, oh, if you do this, it makes this easier or, whatever. I'd love to hear them.
Listen, we were in Barnes & Noble and we saw, I'm going to say, guesstimation, there was probably over 1,000 different fantasy books in there. Like there's so many.
Oh, at least, yeah.
So there's a lot of writers out there. And if you're struggling to write, man, keep pushing through. As I was telling Joe in the car, I had so many projects started, so many stories started, paragraphs, a page or two.
Yeah.
Once I finally got that first chapter fully done, I had such a feeling of accomplishment and relief that after 41 years, I finally finished one chapter and I was like, well, I can't stop now.
Yeah.
So.
See, I was always the same way. I would write something and be like, all right, cool. And then I would trash it or delete it or whatever. And I would never let people read it. This time around, like we talked about it, let's call it our passion project.
I gave everybody my prologue. So I wanted that critical info.
And I
review, I guess.
I pushed out, 4 chapters, very short, but, just getting the basic premise of my story down, said, here, gave it to people to read. And that positive feedback, some of it was not as positive. Some of it was very constructive criticism.
That's good stuff, though.
But I tell people, because I'm always like, give me your honest feedback. Oh, are you sure you want that? Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get upset. I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm a failure. No, I need to know what you see it as. Doesn't mean I'm going to listen to you, but I need to know.
You can't live in a vacuum.
Right.
Like you can't. Like you're never going to get any.
Like every one of our friends could say it's the most amazing thing ever. But as soon as you put it out there, you're going to get people who hate it.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Well, I trust our friends group to say, hey, this is generic or this is, and we're going to discuss the themes here pretty soon about tropes and things. But before we get to the tropes and things, let's talk about, like you had said before, the fan base, why they're dedicated. Because like it's not going to become continuously popular if you don't have a fan base. But what gives, we've already talked about why the fan base might enjoy that, but how do they continue it? And I think one of the big things is the adaptations. If you have something translated from one medium to another, you expand your audience, as in Lord of the Rings. I'll be quite clear. I used to read Wizard magazine. I saw an article way back in the day, and I saw a picture of Ian McKellen dressed as Gandalf, and I read the little snippet under it, and I was like, Lord of the Rings? I had no idea that that was connected to The Hobbit. I knew what The Hobbit was. I didn't know what Lord of the Rings was. Yeah, I knew what Narnia was. I heard about Harry Potter. I'm ashamed to say that at that time, I never really knew.
When I first heard of Lord of the Rings, I thought it was that story of the kids on the island where they like...
Oh, Lord of the Flies.
Yeah, I didn't know what it was. And then I said this before, my one teacher recommended, here, read this, The Hobbit. And I loved it. And then I discovered, oh, this is a prequel? Yeah.
Right? So then, this thing gets translated to the movies. It gets huge. It gets big. So that really expands what you see. If you take it from a comic book to a movie, a book to a movie, or a TV show, like that really, there's an album that's made about it, the music inspired by, it really, or somebody talks about it on a podcast or something like it's good to see expansion somewhere, some sort of, through thread from one A to the other B, and then it starts to like influence culture, right? Like you get people dressed with hobbit feet, walk around with lightsabers, having elf or Vulcan ears, whatever you prefer.
We talked about this before. Cosplay is huge right now.
Yes.
Absolutely huge.
We went to the Ren Fair recently for their winter holiday for their Yule stuff, and there were still people dressed up. It was supposed to be more of a Charles Dickens thing, but it was still people go nuts on it, and it's amazing. I mean, I love Halloween. I love dressing up. Is there anything you'd like to add to that about the popularity and the fandom and anything? On
the fandom, I think a big part of why the fans really keep genres. I think a big part of why the fans really help in keeping franchises like this alive is something that you truly hate, and it's fan theories and lore speculation.
I cannot deny the impact that has on it.
I mean, if you are in love with a franchise and you want more, but there's really not a lot more out there yet.
Fan fiction.
Well, yeah, fan fiction. But
well, it's no different than fan theories. It's you going out and coming up with ideas that don't exist already for that story.
Yes and no. Fan fiction is usually writing a story for them that never happened. The fan theories is more trying to piece together what you think has already happened normally.
Or what could happen.
Yeah. Like, I think Rey is actually going to be Obi-Wan's daughter.
But then you write a fan fiction about it.
Well, there probably is a fan fiction about it.
Yeah, there probably is.
But I think that's a big part of it is like authors and publishing companies see, because we always joke around like the internet's a black hole, things go to die, but
I never joke about that.
Like these companies and stuff, they keep an eye out. They're looking all the time. I mean, I guarantee they've read something before and said, hey, the fans really seem to want this. Let's do it.
Or they say never.
Or that. Yeah. Or that.
Yeah. We can never actually give them a Spider-Man in a Sony movie.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think it all has to do with like the world building. Is if you can make them relate to and want to be a part of that world, you're golden.
I think there's one thing we didn't talk about, but go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, like, how many, I mean, you're a little bit older than me.
Just a smidge.
For the most part, I was older than the Harry Potter generation. For the, like some of the kids in my class read it and whatnot, but.
Well, you were starting high school when it had just come out.
More or less.
Because Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter came out in 2001.
But there's so many younger, I don't want to say kids, but like younger people that are in their late 20s now that I knew growing up. They legitimately wanted nothing more than to get their letter to Hogwarts. Like they wanted so badly awesome, for that world to be real, for them to be surprised with, hey, by the way, you have powers.
And that's kind of what I went to say or was going to say is kids sitting in their room searching for something else, feeling like something is missing. Man, what if I was a wizard? What if I was important? What if I meant to be on a hero's journey?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, that's like I said during, episode 1 of season 1.
Escapism.
When we talked about what drove us to where we're at today, one of my biggest things was, I was bullied a good bit in middle school, a little bit into high school, and it turned into more one of those.
There's a reason you have a face for radio.
Thank you. Well, it was one of those things where I knew everybody, but I had very, very few friends. And at that point in high school, it was more on purpose. I just didn't trust people. But
Stone Cold says DTA, don't trust anybody.
But I mean, reading like fantasy books, movies, sci-fi, it didn't matter. It was your escape. You got to leave the stress of this world for what, a 2-hour movie, or for the hour and a half, 2 hours that you're reading. Or, I mean, when I discovered Harry Potter, I was obsessed. And I mean, I was in my mid-20s when I read Harry Potter. I remember when I was finishing the last book, The Deathly Hallows, I finished it at like 3 a.m. because I'm just like, no, I am finishing this tonight. Like, this is too good to put down.
Our friend Zach, I just saw him the other day. He said that I'm on the last book, Harry Potter. I'm about to be done. And he's like, I'm pretty sure I'm doing Lord of the Rings next. And I was like,
do it.
I was like, that's a great idea. But fair warning, there's a big difference in writing.
I love the Lord of the Rings. Like, I've said it a million times, but the Fellowship of the Ring, that first, we'll say 3/4 is very slow. You've got to have the dedication. Now, the Two Towers, it picks up. It goes. It's amazing.
I'm going to tell him to do The Hobbit first.
I would. Because then, that
way at least he knows.
Because The Hobbit,
before the movies.
The Hobbit's quicker paced, but I don't know. Maybe it'll give him a feel for Tolkien's writing before he dives in.
Yeah.
Because Tolkien has a way of, if you're not ready for it, his writing can be very drawn out.
Yeah, and I'm not, no personal things. I'm not going to get anything of the J.K. Rowling stuff. But her writing style, I read the first 2 books. They're cool, but it's definitely a different style of writing. It's more of a modern way of. It's not as eloquent or elegant or graceful, I guess, fancy schmancy, But let's talk about the hero's journey, because if we're talking about why we want the escapism and what getting that Hogwarts letter is definitely a part of a hero's journey, let's talk about the hero's journey and where it comes from. So we know the hero's journey comes from Joseph Campbell. He first introduced the concept in a book called The Hero with 1,000 Faces back in 1949. So he explores the theory that many mythological stories have a fundamental structure that are all extremely similar with each other. They all have like an A, B, C, D, and E. So he breaks it down. So let's go through and briefly talk about what is the hero's journey and how it's influenced some very popular properties that we know of. Well, now, I did mine, the breakdown, using examples from Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
Did you, in your notes, I know you had the hero's journey. Did you write any examples with yours?
I just wrote what it essentially is. So if you would like, I will do the step. You can give the example.
Sure.
Okay.
Sounds like a fantastic idea. Let's start with.
Hopefully they match up.
Yeah. I mean, I know that there's been different interpretations of the hero's journey.
That's what I mean.
But they're all extremely similar. So go ahead with start with number 1.
All right. So the hero's journey obviously follows the hero from step 1 all the way to becoming the main protagonist of a story.
Yeah, and even though this has been around since the 40s, very popular writers and directors have used this. So if you're a writer, I've looked at this myself. I printed off a blank hero's journey and filled sort of it out. So
yeah.
But anyway, go ahead. What's number 1?
The very first thing is known as the ordinary world. We start out with the hero in normal, everyday life, Joe Schmo.
An example of that would be Frodo Baggins lives a simple life in the Shire, unaware of the greater conflict brewing in Middle-earth. And by the way, spoiler alert, if nobody has seen or read the fucking Lord of the Rings, there is spoilers ahead. Okay.
Let's just do that right now. This season.
Oh, yeah, we're going to spoil tons of things.
So, yeah, okay. So we have Frodo Baggins living his normal everyday life.
Yep.
He's
just kicking
happy,
it in the Shire.
Yeah. Then you get the call to adventure where something disrupts their world. like just turns it upside down and either invites or forces them into some adventure or journey.
Example of this: Gandalf the Grey presents Frodo with the One Ring and reveals the quest to destroy it in Mount Doom.
It's because he's been labeled a disturber of the peace.
Yeah, well.
Love that movie. Oh. Then we get the refusal to the call. This is where your hero hesitates. Like they're scared or hesitant of the challenges that they're about to face. They don't want to do it.
Which is basically Frodo being initially hesitant and frightened by the enormity of the task and the dangers involved. He's like, but what if we just hide it and never talk about it again? That's basically his refusal.
Yeah, leave the Shire?
He doesn't really know. Now, granted, this one, he doesn't really know about Mount Doom yet, but still, he's just like, yeah, we'll just hide it, man. Like,
Spoiler, he leaves the Shire.
Yeah.
Then we have meeting the mentor. This is one of my favorite ones. I just got to that point in the story I'm writing. I didn't really realize it until I was doing these notes for tonight that I'm following the hero's journey without intentionally following the hero's journey.
Well, it's because we've been
conditioned.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. So it's exactly what it stands for. They meet someone who can guide or prepare them. You know, that one, almost like a turning point inspiration person that's going to give them the motivation that they need.
And in this story, again, it is Gandalf. Now, some of these happen a little bit before or after, but this is basically how it rolls down. But this one is an example of Gandalf becoming Frodo's mentor, guiding him and advising him on his journey. Like, yes, and he does meet Aragorn, but he is out there going, hey, we should go here. We should go see the elves. We should go here. You know, so.
See, I feel like for him, meeting the mentor could also fall into like the fellowship being formed.
I think so as well.
Okay. You know, because it was kind of, that was the push that was needed.
Yeah, I think once he finds Aragorn and everybody's Aragorn, I don't know.
Aragorn with
Aragorn.
I mean, I'd follow him.
Everybody. Yeah. Hell yeah. I love how they said when he was being trained for the movie for the sword fighting, the guy trained him was like, nobody's ever picked it up this good. It is amazing. Like this.
Well, there were actors saying that like, oh, hey, we're going to be filming at, you know, such and such location in New Zealand. In full Aragorn clothing, he'd grab his backpack and he'd hike. I'll meet you there. Because he said that's what a ranger would do. He would go out and he would trek it.
He tried to do so many stunts by him, like without stunt doubles. He pushed and pushed. Most of the stuff you see on screen is him.
And we've talked about
everything they would allow him to do.
We talked about it. The scene where he kicks the Uruk-hai helmet, he breaks his toe. That scream is real.
And he stayed in character.
He did.
Amazing.
Then we have crossing the threshold. This is the point where your hero leaves their comfort zone and enters into a new unknown world. That could be physically, that could be emotionally, mentally. The point is, they made that commitment. It's time to step out and do it.
Example of this is Frodo leaves the Shire with Sam, Merry, and Pippin, entering the unknown world of adventure. If you think to the movie where Maggot's farm is, you know, he stops and he's like, I've never been farther than this right here. Like
Sam says, one more step, and it's the furthest from home I've ever been.
Have you ever been? Yeah. Oh man, fucking Sam, dude, he's awesome. Like, shout out Sean Astin, man. Like,
dude,
awesome.
There are so many like clubs, I guess you could say, or like that say, no, Sam is the hero of the story.
Okay, I'll be very clear.
He literally carries Frodo.
Bilbo is awesome. Frodo, meh. Sam, hell yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah, like Sam was, I mean, he went in there, stormed the orc thing, but that's fine. Let's continue. We're going to go off and go watch Lord of the Rings. It's a great movie.
Then we go into the tests, allies, and enemies. So this is where the hero starts to face actual challenges. They learn who their friends are, who they can trust. They learn, and you sometimes even just straight up meet the enemy. Like, this is real now.
An example of this is Frodo faces numerous challenges and meets allies like Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli. And there's also an encounter where he meets the Ringwraiths and Saruman's forces. Like you said, yeah, he meets his people who will be on the adventure with him, and he meets some of the enemies.
Did you ever see the Lord of the Rings cut where in the entire franchise, all three movies, they only show the scenes where Legolas is talking to Frodo? It's literally and my bow. That's it. And they said like
because he knows Frodo was a flake. Like he just already knew. He's like, this guy.
the running joke is that he didn't even know Frodo or didn't know Legolas's name. Because there's the scene when he's laying in the bed after he's stabbed in Rivendell and people are running in.
Oh, the slow-mo, and he's like,
you can see him mouthing the names.
He never says Legolas.
Or no,
Legolas,
sorry, maybe no, it's not that part. It's the end afterwards when he's in Rivendell.
Yeah.
And Legolas comes in and he just smiles. He doesn't.
Like, oh, it's you. That guy.
Next, we have what's known as the Big Challenge, also known as the Ordeal. This is when they have to confront their greatest fear or a major obstacle that stands in the way.
Right. Before I give the example of that one, I did note that on mine, I had 12 steps instead of 11 on yours. And they do have one step before this called Approach the Innermost Cave. But, you know, like I said, some of them do fluctuate, 12 steps, 11 steps.
Yeah.
There might be even more than that in other ones. I'm not sure.
It's a program.
But an example for the ordeal, or the challenge as you called it, would be the Fellowship battles the Balrog in Moria and Gandalf falls into the abyss, seemingly lost. So you kind of get this, oh no, type moment that kind of really strikes fear, and you get like your first big loss of the movie, the first unexpected death, which is great for me because like I didn't really know about the books. So when I saw that in theaters, I had no idea that shit was coming. No idea Gandalf was going. And yes, I did swell a little bit in the eye sockets.
You were ticked off?
Yeah, I was angry and sad and upset, and I was like, this is some bullshit.
Well, I think that would definitely fall under a major obstacle.
Kind of like when they killed in The Rookie, where Emily and I were on the couch and went, no, they didn't.
Spoiler.
Well, there you go.
No, when Danae and I were watching, that, we're just like, no. And then he jumps in and he tries to save her, and it's just like, come on.
We screamed on the couch. We were mad.
I liked her.
Yeah, I was like, do you what? And now just got stabbed. So I was like, what? They can't just like kill another. Was George R. R. Martin writing this show? Just kill everybody you like.
So after Gandalf falls into the abyss, or the fiery unknown, we move on to the next step, the reward. This is after succeeding, our hero gains something of value. It could be knowledge, power, or, in often cases like this, a magical item.
Yeah, mine says in parentheses, seizing the sword next to reward. An example of this would be Frodo and Sam capture Gollum, who reluctantly becomes their guide, with that really thin string they put around his neck.
Yeah, it burns his...
It burns us.
See, I was thinking too, though, like after all these trials, like they went through the gauntlet in the Mines of Moria, they end up in Lothlorien, where they get...
They get all their pieces,
they get
That's a better example because that would be like...
It was kind of like, you finished the level, here's your reward.
Dun, 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 dun. Did we level up yet? No.
No, you lost
stop
somebody.
Asking me that in the game.
You lost somebody. Oh, I hate that.
No, you like, no, this mission's not over.
In your D&D campaign?
Yeah. Like, you got to get through this town first.
So what you do, every time they ask you, level that person down for the rest of the rest of the
session. It'll be negative.
The rest of the session. All right. So after the reward, what do we got? We have the road back. It's time to head home, and oftentimes you're going to face some more roadblocks on the way home.
And those Star Trek fans out there, it's been a long road. They'll know. The fans will know.
Okay.
The fans will know. The road back, the journey to Mount Doom is fraught with difficulty and betrayal, especially by Gollum. He makes us makes him pay. Which is not a line. I made that one up myself.
So next up, we have the final test.
I'm not going to confuse this for anybody.
Yeah. We have the final test, also known as the resurrection. Our hero has overcome the last challenge, proving that they've grown. But sometimes there's one final test of your growth.
Example of this is Frodo's near destruction by the power of the ring at Mount Doom, where he gets his finger bit off, and ultimately overcomes its influence with the help of Sam and Gollum. Okay, so yeah, Sam helped carry him, but Gollum helped him by biting his finger off.
That is true.
Like, because he was going to walk away with it. He's like, no, I'm doing some Isildur shit right now, and I'm just walking away. Like, this is mine. Like, I am not throwing it in there.
Cast it into the fire.
No.
I sound like Alan Rickman.
Well, yeah.
See, you could also say on this, the scoring of the Shire, that they don't show it in the movie, but in the book, They
In the
succeed.
extended, they show like a possibility of what's happening.
Yeah, they show it in the Palantir, I think it is. Or no, maybe it's the pool with Lothlorien.
Maybe, but I
don't
mean,
remember,
they
but-
show him getting whipped and
Yeah, in the
yeah.
book, they get back to the Shire to find that Saruman and his forces actually took over the Shire.
That
And
makes sense. I mean,
they're not done yet, you know?
yeah, there's a lot more to the books than there was on
Yeah.
screen. But yeah, I mean, you got to condense that.
I mean, the movie's already had 8 endings. I mean,
I like the ending where they do all the drawings and stuff and Enya sings.
oh, okay.
Oh, I'm serious. I like Enya. She's got some good shit.
Well, the final step of the hero's journey is exactly what we just said, the return home.
Or the return with the elixir.
Yeah, they bring back what they've gained to help others. Again, this could be like an item. This could be knowledge or power. And I feel
Knowledge is power.
in Frodo's case, I feel like it's his experience.
The more you know. Frodo returns to the Shire, but he finds he cannot truly return to his old life due to profound changes the journey has wrought upon him. He eventually leaves Middle-earth for the Undying Lands, finding peace. And not even telling his homies about it in the carriage.
Yeah.
They get to the boat, and they're like, oh yeah, we're going to say goodbye. Oh, by the way, deuces. Like, wait, what? You're not coming back?
Sam was pissed. He's like, I just carried you and you're bailing?
Yeah, like, just another reason to
They
take it.
didn't even invite Sam.
All I gotta say is you got to take 1 point away from House Baggins because, you know, what the hell, dude? Just bailed on him. Even Malfoy was like there at the end for Harry Potter on the train station, at least. I mean, shit.
Malfoy's mother was there for Harry Potter.
Yeah, like, so that's our hero's journey. We talked about where it came from, what it was all about. So let's talk about the main story tropes that you always see in fantasy. These are like the things that kind of, for me, like really define what makes a fantasy story. Now, yes, granted, they can be in some other genres, but they're like really key for fantasy stories. We're talking like, for instance, The Chosen One. You know, you got like Harry Potter.
Neo.
He is the chosen one. You know, he's the one to stop the evil forces. You have your mentors like Gandalf or Merlin. You got to have that wise wizard. You know, that's a trope. You have the Dark Lord like Sauron or Lord of the.
Often their parents have died at some point.
Yes, that's a good trope that I don't think is on my list, but yeah,
It's also required to be
Orphans.
a Disney princess.
it helps. It definitely helps. I don't know if it's I mean, you'll eventually become one. Like I said, Dark Lords, you get your Saurons. They don't always have to be big, bad, magical creatures, you know, or baddies. You know, like Sauron, you can have like Joffrey, Game of Thrones, somebody like that. What's the Last Unicorn? You have like, was it like the angry bull that's like protecting the castle or something, or David Bowie in Labyrinth? You know, you have a guy like that too. You know, you gotta have your bad guy. Magic and sorcery. Obviously, we've talked about this. There's a lot of magical systems out there, spells and wands and Quidditch and things, you know, and how to make things happen. We talked about quests and journeys. There's obviously like usually a quest you have to go on. You got to go destroy the ring, or you have to go get the ring. You know, it's some sort of quest or journey. We talked about medieval settings. There's usually something to do with castles and horses and enchanted forests and swords. Not really anything technology based or that advanced anyhow. This is something we're going to touch on here in a little bit as well. You have your mythical creatures. I won't really go into that now, but there's usually some creatures that they're not cats and dogs or monkeys. They're something that's fantastical that don't really exist in reality. The epic battle between good and evil. Like, how can you have a fantasy story without the good trying to overcome evil and evil trying to cover the world in darkness, right?
Right.
Hidden lineage, secret identities. You got to have those in there. You know, like Luke Skywalker discovers, oh, wait a minute, what? I'm important.
Strider.
Yeah. We had no idea that he was the long lost king.
Yep.
Then you have epic battles, of course, which I'm going to get into here now. But you have epic battles like the Battle of the Bastards or Helm's Deep. You know, just,
I was waiting for that.
You can't, like, Helm's Deep is like one of the ones, or the Battle of the Pelennor Fields. Is that what it's called? Like, you know, that final huge, like you got to have the big battles. But speaking of battles, let's go through just a couple random sword fights, because you always have, like, think back to King Arthur versus the Black Knight, which is a very old and very basic, you cannot pass until you defeat I know you're thinking of the funny one.
Monty Python.
It's just a flesh wound. Like, bro, dude, you ain't got no arms. He choked him out and he ain't had no arms. What? Well, Theo Vaughn joke for you.
No, I know exactly what you're talking about.
He had no arms.
So what do you want to look at here? Like popular, well-known?
Well, I mean, Brienne versus the Hound.
Mm-hmm.
Huge. I mean, Aragon versus the Urukai. Wesley versus Inigo Montoya. That fight right there just is awesome. Vader versus Obi-Wan Kenobi. Now, again, that bends the sci-fi fantasy, but it's a sword fight.
Éowyn versus the Witch King.
What word did you just say?
Éowyn versus the Witch King
of Agmar. Gotcha.
Yes.
Arya Stark versus
everybody.
The Ice King dude there, where she just drops a knife and stabs him. Don't know, you didn't see that coming, but Legolas versus the Orcs, Gandalf versus the Balrog, Oberyn Martell versus the Mountain. What a battle that was on.
So it's
on
all
screen.
Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings so far.
About Perseus versus Medusa.
Okay.
Definitely not Game of the Thrones. I mean, that one right there, we're talking about mythology based. Think about like Heracles and Thor and Cyrano and all those epic heroes who had to do like labors and things.
Well, think about even modern. Think of like the MCU. The big climax of a movie is always, Captain America versus Red Skull.
Or Captain America versus Iron Man.
Iron Man, well, yeah. Or Iron Man versus Ironmonger. Like, you always have that climax battle that takes the cake. It comes right out of this. Yeah,
well, I mean, those battles wouldn't exist, though, except because of my last one, Hector versus Achilles.
Ooh, okay.
We're talking one of the greatest. I mean, people say that Troy might have existed. We still don't know 100%. We think we know where Troy was, but the elements in those stories or even the Odyssey are all fantastically based. You have Charybdis and Scylla and all those things, but Achilles was supposed to be unkillable. Hector was supposed to be unkillable. You have, the unstoppable force, it's the whole thing. And then, I don't know, I love the movie Troy. I know it didn't do the greatest of the box office. I really, really enjoyed that movie. Eric Bana versus Brad Pitt, just beating the living hell out of each other. Just great. And of course, Conan. Every sword fight with Conan. We haven't really talked about Conan that much here, but Arnold Schwarzenegger's Conan, the comic books Conan, the novels Conan, that whole Cimmeria, that whole area, like that back in the 70s really helped kickstart fantasy up again. I think that was a big catalyst for things. But let's go back to fantastical creatures. We know about people with swords that we can pick them up and they're really great at it. We know we can be Jon Snow here and there if we want to be in our heads. But let's talk about the fantastical creatures. I'm going to let you take the lead on this one. What type of fantastical creatures do we find in this fantasy genre? We find fantastical ones. I love the word fantastical. I don't even know if that, I've been using it for years. Is that an actual word? Probably not. I don't think it's a real word, but it's fun. I use it. But it's fun. I think I put it in my story too. So I broke the creatures of fantasy down into 4 categories that I felt best described what they are. So the first one being just straight up mythical and magical beings. And in this category, I put things like dragons and unicorns, griffins, phoenix, even mermaids or mermen, centaurs, fairies, that type of, they're just things of, of legend. Like, most of these, I mean, except for the centaurs, some people could argue they thought existed at one time or another. That is true. Weirdly enough. There's that one bird, man, that's like a giraffe with wings. Yeah. You found that skeleton. You probably thought that was some sort of mythological flying creature. Then the next category I have is the dark and fearsome. So this is more of the distorted, the distorted type of creatures, the ones that are darker by nature. Harpies is a great one. Yeah, orcs, trolls, vampires, werewolves. Werewolves are a little back and forth just because that was based on mythology. Well, that is true. So. That is true. And then even in a lot of stories, you have some type of demons or demon-esque like creatures. The djinn? Well, I have that later. But yeah. Okay. All right. But no, you're right. The djinn, depending on your, I don't want to say religious background, but your cultural background, like that is true. In the Middle East, you don't joke about the djinn. They are very, very superstitious. Very malevolent. Yes. Yeah.
Next, we go into what I call the unique. So this is fantasy or fantastical creatures
Okay. All right.
specifically made for a certain, say, franchise. So, like, the Ents, they were,
Big talking trees.
for the most part, I mean, they were created for Lord of the Rings.
You're talking way too fast for them to hear, though. You got to talk way slower when you talk about ends.
Yeah, well, that's true. Hobbits. Halflings are one thing. Hobbits were basically coined into Lord of the Rings. Yes, they're a halfling.
Yeah,
He gave them
you
their
can
own-
find some basis where he drew inspiration, but yeah.
He gave them their own race, essentially, as hobbits. The Chimera.
Ooh, good mythology from Greece.
Yep.
Yeah.
Golems, not Smeagol.
Yeah, you're talking about the robots.
Like
the
stone
clay-made,
golems.
yeah.
And yeah. Well,
They were like robots before robots existed. in a way.
the idea was like you would almost like voodoo, I guess. So like you would create the body and then imbue not a soul, but a purpose into it, and it would function to serve that purpose.
Like the like Talos, I think, was some big metal golem creature thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Pegasus.
Oh, good old Pegasi.
Pegasus, it was definitely, a staple of fantasy, in my opinion. Like
What is the one with Harry Hamlin? Maybe
Harry and the Hendersons.
No, there was a claymation Hercules or something. One of those movies where somebody rides on a Pegasus.
Oh, okay.
This was back in like late 70s, early 80s. It was.
All right.
Yeah.
And then I have the last category is the hybrid or simply lesser knowns. And in that I have like the Minotaurs. Yeah, people know what they are, but you don't see them often,
I love a Minotaur.
especially in a labyrinth.
Yeah.
Mm.
I like to put them in settings outside of
Actually,
them,
in
but
a game we were playing once, a D&D, I put John into a labyrinth because he made a bad choice. And there was a Minotaur. He found the exit. He went back for a chest.
Of course he did.
And he died. Like, died. And then I have basilisks. And now I
Ooh,
put
okay.
that because in the D&D world, it's a giant six-legged lizard. In Harry Potter, it was a giant serpent.
And in mythology, it's a fucking chicken-looking Brewster thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It has
It's all about interpretation.
changing. Yeah. Nymphs, because they go
Yes.
from anything from a
I'm a
fairy
nymphs
to...
are a personal mythological favorite of mine.
Oh, really?
Yes, I love the idea of nymphs. Like some people love elves. I think nymphs are fucking cool because there's so
Okay,
many of
yeah.
them. There's mountain nymphs and water nymphs and fucking there's.
But that's a lot of
It's
people
a
just
whole
think that
thing.
they're the same thing as fairies, but
They're not. No.
Right.
No.
The Kraken. The Kraken
Yeah,
is
however you want to
very-
perceive the Kraken. Yeah.
Well, it's a very specific creature that was designed by
Well, the Kraken's been around in mythology for
I
a
forget
long
what his name
time.
was. Yeah, but I mean, as far as like making its way into stories, like
Probably
fantasy
like
stories,
Hubbard or somebody probably did something,
remember,
or
yeah.
who's the Lovecraft guy?
That's
Maybe
it. Lovecraft. Yeah.
Well, his whole entire beings that dude created too.
Oh yeah.
Cthulhu and all those.
And then the last thing I have is the Jinn.
Yeah.
Which, if you don't know, Jinn are essentially genies, but
Go watch Wishmaster.
they're not. Yeah, like they're not.
1 and 2,
ooh,
not the other ones.
Robin Williams, I'm going to give you 3 wishes. No, these things
I thought Andrew Devoff.
they want to just.
Make your wishes.
So that's what I have as far as the like creatures. What about you?
Well, Sphinx, Banshees,
Ooh,
ogres, goblins. I think Medusa. I mean, you hit pretty much all the big ones. Griffins, I think are really cool.
oh yeah, definitely.
Griffins are dope. I messaged you today about and talked to you guys last night about making the different creatures in my story
Mhm.
and how I'm not using dragons and unicorns.
Yeah.
Now it is a magical fantasy world and they could exist, but I'm making a unique creatures. Like I don't want to just do a fantasy story with dragons. So taking inspiration from all these type of things, it's cool to kind of create your own unique spice to the story, I guess.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But speaking about people going to labyrinths and going back for chests, let's go in a little section I like to call Dungeons and Dragons, which is basically what impact today that we live in do you think that fantasy has had on our culture? Can you think of anything like, for instance, like literature? We talked about the books and how the fantasy genre is still maybe not, we might think it's going in a slump on TV and on the big screen, but like books, like I said, people are still, a lot of times when people go, I want to write something. What's one of the first genres that anybody ever tries to write?
Magic.
Yeah,
Fantasy.
either magic or
Murder.
it's either a Star Wars, Star Trek-ish thing, or it's fantasy.
I would say probably good 4/5 of the time. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I think that's a big, it's something that's still around, and it's an easy, accessible way for us to expand our mind.
Yeah, I can agree with that. But I also think part of that is that most people end up writing, as like you said earlier, as far as fantasy, for an escape. So what's the best way to escape? Write something completely off the wall that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you're creating your own world where the rules no longer apply to you. And that usually translates into either fantasy or sci-fi.
Yeah.
Now, understand, people, those aren't the only two categories. They're not the only two genres of movies and TV and whatnot out there.
We're saying this because it's just easier to break it down this way.
Just so closely related, too. Because a lot of people think fantasy is just anything made up.
Because you can we watch Outlander. Outlander is romance. Outlander is action. It's science fiction because there's like time travel, but it's also fantasy in a way as well, because you don't know how the time travel isn't by technological devices. It's by the way of magic. So it blends all the different genres together. We just say sci-fi fantasy or, like to mix. It's just easier to separate those two to say it's this one or that one. But there's plenty of stories that interweave all of those together. For sure.
Yeah, but to answer your question, how do I feel it's, what'd you say, impacted, I guess, society?
Like our culture and our society
impact.
today.
I think it's allowed people to come out of their shells. Like, I really think that the widespread, I guess you'd almost call it not epidemic, but how would you say, like, Game of Thrones, how, like, it was a huge...
I think what you're trying to say here is that it got people to be more comfortable to come out and say, I like these things. If you watch super old TV shows or movies from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, people that had a wizard painted on their van or carried around a copy of the Chronicles of Narnia probably got picked on. If you had a comic book in your hand, you probably got picked on back in the day. Like, oh, you fucking nerd, fucking loser geek.
Just
but
go back
now,
20 years. Go back 20 years. Think about exactly where you were.
Yeah, 20 years. Okay.
No, you weren't.
Well, I was right out.
I was still in. You were right out. And if someone came up to you and said, hey, do you want to play Dungeons and Dragons tonight? What would your first reaction have been?
Well, I would have said yes.
See, I would have said yes, but I think I'd also been like, no, or whatever. But the whole time thinking like, damn, I really want to play.
But this gives you have blockbusters like Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter and Game of Thrones.
See, I think it
puts it out there as okay.
Yeah, it made it more acceptable to like that type of stuff.
Yeah, because it's popular, it makes money. So, you still get people like, I got a guy at work. He's like, oh, Star Trek and Star Wars, it's all just stupid. That's fine, man. You can go do whatever your hobby is. That's fine. But the fact is, it's a money maker. Okay. Like,
oh yeah. Yeah.
Like there's a reason we keep getting these big, giant, popular franchise. There's a reason we're getting another Lord of the Rings Gollum movie that we know we don't want. We're not going to do that, but because it makes money.
Yep.
And I also think that because of those blockbusters and pushing the boundaries, it's helped with technology in a way for our TV shows and movies to be made. I think those type of like Lord of the Rings pushed the boundaries of what you could do with CGI at the time.
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing as well. I think it just overall it's made it socially acceptable. I went LARPing. I started going to the Ren Fair. Yes, I did have Lord of the Rings books. I did have Dungeons and Dragons books, but I never had anybody to play them with. And I probably would have, but if somebody said, do you want to go LARPing when I was in high school, I'd have been like, no.
Well, great example.
Absolutely not.
I started playing D&D probably almost 10 years ago now. At the time, I hid my D&D books because I didn't want like my wife's parents finding out or even my parents, because I was afraid they would just be like, that's very childish. Or,
my mom played, so it helped.
Or like, oh, that's evil, And I'll admit, like, I always thought, there must be something wrong with it, because I was raised that, things like that are bad.
It's so crazy how our childhoods are so different. Like,
it really is. And somehow we became friends. But at the same time, like, I would hide the Harry Potter books on my bookshelf at home. Now, as I've gotten older, I frankly don't care anymore. But I want my kids to read them. Like, this is okay. Enjoy it. Have fun with it.
It's not the Antichrist. right? Like I won't get too religious, but think about the satanic panic and everything back in the day. It's not like that anymore.
Right. Like my dad actually, he asked me, I can understand my father is extremely, extremely easy to talk to when it comes to this stuff. Like he will sit there and just listen to you. He wants to know your point of view before he makes any type of judgment call. Well, not even judgment call, just opinion. And my wife went over with the kids one day. They asked where I was. Oh, he said D&D. That's when we actually played in person, which I miss playing in person. And he asked me about it, and he's, well, like, what about the, the negative aspects and the witchcraft, or, all that type of, I don't remember the exact words. And I just explained it to him that it's a choose your own adventure book. If you don't agree with magic, don't be a magic user. If you don't, well, they worship other gods and stuff. You don't have to. You don't have to ever.
You can be an atheist in D&D.
Well, no, not even that. You just don't ever have to even put that into your story. That could be personal, completely unrelated. I mean, unless you're a paladin or a cleric where you kind of need to choose somebody. I'm like, you don't have to subscribe to it.
No.
Well, it's, are you promoting killing? You can play as a pacifist. There's a campaign that I've read before where these people played as pacifist monks with insane charisma, and they talked their way through almost the entire campaign.
That'd be interesting.
Boring, but interesting. Like, that's what it is to me, the ultimate way to just be somebody new for a little bit. Experiment with a personality. Like,
it's like cosplaying without dressing up.
Well, it's like when we went LARPing. There are people that I've talked to outside of the LARP that are very quiet, shy people, but at the LARP, they are in your face, like raring to go.
I was kind of the opposite, but yeah, I was like, I'm okay talking to people normally, but I was like, I don't know what to do here. I don't know what to do here. But
it was just,
it's a fun thing for sure.
Like the fact that fantasy. I mean, I know we probably sound like the ultimate nerds right now, and I'm okay with it.
Oh, that's fine. I have Enterprise hanging in my car. I'm good.
You have the Millennium Falcon on your shirt.
Oh, yeah. And
there's
one
an Enterprise above
here.
us. Like, there's Wolverine claws above us. I hope they don't fall, actually. But no, like the fact that it's acceptable and you can just, oh, you like that? Go for it. Be who you are. Have fun. Who cares? I love it.
As long as you're not hurting anybody, I think it's a good thing. You can't just... And it's fine if you are not a geeky person at all, and you don't. And I'm not sure why you're listening, but I'm glad you are.
That is true.
If you are a hunter and you are a fisherman, and you just think anything like my old man, he hated anything to do with sci-fi, Star Trek, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, anything I'd ever put on the TV. He's like, this is hogwash. This is stupid. Like, I don't like it. He watched all the Fast and Furious movies, but he won't watch anything else. Like, those were realistic, and it was fun because they had to deal with cars. If you're a gearhead...
ramping between buildings.
It's cool that you can love all those things, and I think if you can go around wearing... And I have nothing against the hunters or anything. I got no problem there, so I'm not trying to start a war. But if you can walk around in camo and orange all day, or just your mossy oak all day, why can't I walk around in a Star Trek t-shirt?
Oh, yeah.
Why can't I have Gollum on my t-shirt? Like, why can't I do that instead? Like, you love your stuff. We love our stuff. But I think, geek culture is big now. It's everywhere now. We would not have a podcast, I don't think, today if geek culture had not broken through and become mainstream and acceptable to like. You know what I mean? And I think Marvel has helped with that. DC's helped with that, and it's...
Well, and like we talked about a little bit off mic, these episodes get anywhere from, on average, I'd say 40 to 100 views on YouTube anyways. Now, do people listen the whole way through? I don't know. But obviously there's a market. People want to hear. They want to discuss these type of things. Discuss it with us, please, first off. But it just, that shows me that even if people aren't interacting with us, they're finding us and listening to us. And the metrics even said it was something like 60% of our listeners are returning people.
That's good.
So to me, that means that doing this, it could be somebody's way of expressing themselves if they don't have people in their life that they can
you said that we had some listeners from Asia and Africa.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't have the accessibility that we have, like the internet access to just or to be able to go to a Barnes and Noble like we do. So, for somebody to listen to us or a podcast similar to us is a good escapism for them. They get to hear opinions. I work with people that I do like working with them, but they're completely different people than I am. And it's nice to be able to get and hear different opinions and takes and ideas from other people that are similar minded to me. When I say, hey man, if Aragorn and his whole entire United Kingdom take on all of Westeros and their armies. How do you think that would handle? If I said that to some people I worked with or my family members, they'd be like, I don't know what to say. You and I could probably talk about it for 2 hours and discuss where the ring rates came in.
I was say, it's funny. In my head, I'm like, I know who's going to win. However, what if this side does this? Oh, what if this side?
It's the same Star Wars versus Star Trek. Yeah. What do you include? What do you don't include? And those are the type of discussions that are really fun to have. And that's why I love fantasy, because fantasy is just so expansive.
Mm-hmm. So one last thing and we'll move on. I find it amazing, like you were saying, how, in today's age, it's okay to be a geek. It's okay to, express yourself.
Well, look at the fashion. Fashion's different now.
I have a Uruk-hai that I 3D printed on my desk. I have a Baby Yoda. I refuse to say Grogu.
Well, that one's specifically Grogu.
I know.
And
Yours
isn't.
And then I have 2 or 3 D20s sitting on my desk.
I have a...
Do you know how many
Darth Vader cup holder thing.
Oh, nice. Do you know how many people have come into my office, to get help, and while they're sitting there, hanging out waiting, they see that and they start talking to me about Lord of the Rings or Star Wars, or my favorite is they'll pick up a die and they'll roll it and be like, "Ooh, nat 1 or nat 20." It's like, you wouldn't know what that is unless you have played.
Yeah, you would just say, "Oh, a 1's not good." But if you say nat, not natural.
Yeah.
If you say nat 20.
Well, there's this one lady in finance who I never in a million years would have pinned her as a D&D player. Turns out her and her husband have been playing with like the same people for almost 2 decades.
Wow.
It's one of those, like, you would never have guessed that, but it no longer makes you look like a nerd today. Like, if anything, it's that weird backwards trope of it's cool to be a geek.
Often when people give me a weird eye when I say I like the things I like, whether it's sci-fi, fantasy, or my type of metal music, and I say, yeah, we get together, and when they're like, "Oh, you do that?" I'm like, yeah, I get out of my comfort zone and I become somebody different and I try new things.
But that's why we went LARPing, because we wanted to just see what it was like.
Like, I think you have to experience the world, and sometimes you have to do it in the ways that are available, and you have to find different avenues. My best friend, I would not have been best friends with him for this specific reason. I came into class.
Is that your friend out west?
Yeah. I came into class and I sat down and he had a Hulk comic book sitting there, and I didn't know his name. And I just was like, "Oh, the Hulk, huh? He's pretty cool, man, when he gets angry." And we just, from then on, because I just talked about that comic book, and now here we are so many years later, best friends living across the world from each other. Like, it's just, if you take that insecurity of yours and put it aside for just a second, and just go out of your comfort zone, just real quick, and just say a line. Just look at somebody that looks a little bit different and just inquire about it. It's not like you got to all of a sudden be a D&D player, but just dip your toe into who somebody else is real quick.
Yeah.
Like, "Oh, that dude looks like a fucking weirdo." Maybe he's not a weirdo. Maybe he has a lot of interests and similar likes that you do. Maybe you and him can both love Survivor on TV or whatever TV show it is, man. Maybe that guy loves drag racing like you do. You don't know. You don't know until you ask.
Yep.
You got to reach out to your fellow people out there, man. And fantasy and sci-fi is a great way to do it. I think we've covered everything we can about fantasy here. Before you go into your final thing there, do you have any good recommendations for people that are just jumping into fantasy? Like, what's a good book or two where they can just jump in to fantasy, something easy?
When it comes to the books in fantasy, one of my biggest pet peeves is when the authors have like the most ridiculous names. Or I said before, my friend who he was writing a story, he had a Garrus, a Gareth, and a Varys.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, dude, you got to change something here.
Right.
And I would say, Game of Thrones, but Game of Thrones is actually extremely difficult to read.
I couldn't read it. I tried to read it. I couldn't do it.
I recommend, go young adult. I know you could be 40, but if you want to get into the genre, one of my favorites, other than like Harry Potter, of course, is the Percy Jackson and Lightning Thief. Well, I guess just Percy Jackson, the Olympians series.
Yeah.
Very easy to read, very simple, but it's a fun premise that will help you understand. Like they mix mythology with modern, but it's 100% fantasy based.
I would say C.S. Lewis, The Magician's Nephew,
Ooh,
which is before the Chronicles of Narnia. I mean, it's before the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. But let me speak correctly here. It's before, and he wrote it after, I do believe, but it comes before then and explains how the world's created. I think that one is a really fun and easy read for people. I would say the Chronicles of Narnia, but that one specifically is a good intro to fantasy.
If you want an easy intro into like kind of that magic world, TV. It's called Once Upon a Time.
That is a great alternate universal way of Disney princesses and princes.
Disney fairy tales, brings them into modern day. So yeah, we have technology, but it's all like fantasy based. It's a really good show. The first few seasons.
Yeah, I was gonna say when you start getting towards the end, it's like, but the first 4 seasons are really good.
If you want that show that you can just suspend all belief for a little bit,
The 10th Kingdom is very similar to that, and it came out way before. It's like it was a mini series on I think NBC, but you can get like a box set or find the DVD somewhere. But it's like 10 hours long or something because it was broken up into a mini series.
Okay.
But it's very similar to that, finding an alternate way to view Snow White and Cinderella and all the kingdoms they have. But
if you're more of a heavy reader and you want something solid to get into, our mutual friend Joe was recommending the Brandon Sanderson series, the Stormlight Archive.
Yeah, he did mention that yesterday. Yeah, he did Mistborn as well. But
yeah. I mean, I know he said that it's a pretty heavy read, but if you're a big reader.
Didn't we pick up the first book and it was like...
It was 1,300 pages or something.
It was
like that.
Crazy how big that book is.
Or I strongly recommend get the Dresden Files. That is a great way to look at modern day fantasy. He's a wizard in modern times.
Right.
And it is so much fun.
I also recommend Wheel of Time. I think it's not too fancy. It's not too boring. It's kind of middle road. And I don't mean that as it sucks. I mean, it's middle road. It's easy to read. I hate it when I have to reread a paragraph 5 times to digest what I just read. Like, what the hell did they just say with all those 12 syllable words? You know what I mean? I think the characters are named where you understand who they are. They're separated. You can follow the story easily. It's not convoluted or confusing. So I would say the Wheel of Time. If you want something a little heavier, something that has a little action in it and some dire stakes.
I like it. Yeah, I do intend to read it. I haven't gotten there yet. If you have suggestions for us, let us know. Because, I mean, I know between Michael and I, we cover every medium between, movies, TV, book.
Oh, yeah.
Podcasts. I mean, let us know what you recommend, and I'm sure one of us will check it out. But I do have a few here written down that I would love to hear your take on. Are they fantasy or sci-fi, and why you justify it?
I'm in the hot seat. All right.
Because for the most part, I have a hard time deciding with these.
Gotcha. Do you want me to explain why they're one or the other, just briefly?
Just quick, yeah. But there's a few here that we did lightly touch on. So.
Gotcha. Okay. What do you got?
The first one, we'll start easy. The Eternals.
Like the Marvel Eternals?
Yes. So I understand it's in the MCU, but they are supposed to be considered almost celestial beings.
Well, they were genetically manipulated, so it's sci-fi.
You call it sci-fi, even though they're using magic?
Well, what do you call them? The Celestials genetically made them.
Okay.
Yeah, so sci-fi.
Hunger Games.
Sci-fi. I don't remember there any being magic in the movies.
There's no magic, but it was all like bows and arrows, and it was like a corrupt government style.
Dystopian, sort of in the future. It's sci-fi.
Okay.
Sci-fi.
Lost.
See, Lost is where you start getting into that spiritual realm. Were they alive or dead as we're watching? That's one of those weird gray areas. I would say between the Man in Black and the weird smoke monster creature, I'm gonna put one extra toe on the fantasy side of that, only because technology didn't really drive the story more as mysticism did. So I'm going to go fantasy.
Okay. We mentioned it, but the Thor movies.
Well, see, this is Marvel Thor
in general.
This is Marvel Thor, so I'm going to go science, even though they're supposedly gods, but they're just more powerful cosmic beings. If you were like the mythological Thor, I'll go fantasy. But when we're talking Marvel Thor, I'm going to go science fiction.
The Prestige.
the Prestige, the with Batman and Wolverine.
Yeah, Hugh Jackman and the other guy.
I'm gonna
Christian
go.
Bale.
I'm gonna go science fiction because it was all illusions. It wasn't actual
Was
magic.
it though?
No, it wasn't.
Was it though?
No, it wasn't.
Because supposedly that
No.
that big machine could teleport.
Yeah, but it was science. It was a machine, as you said, technological
Okay.
machine that manipulated electrons.
We already said about the magicians, and the last one. I think this is going to be one of the more difficult ones to pin down because it is supposed to be fantasy, but it has technology.
Okay.
The Shannara Chronicles
So you're in the future because of
with elves.
Yeah. Okay. Let me explain here because I'm going to work my way through this.
Okay, go ahead.
You're in the future because of like some stupid shit that humans did, but you're so far in the future to where things have evolved, but they've also evolved the ability to use magic. So because they're actually using magic, and are people called mages and wizards in this?
It's been a while. I don't remember that much.
I mean, there is
I just remember
swords.
they did refer to people as elves.
Yeah, I mean, they also called the one people the troll, or not, what are they, trolls or gnomes or something? Or dwarves,
yeah.
the dwarves, but they were underground. They were named that. I mean, they look like elves. They have the pointed ears, but did they live a lot longer or anything? That, it's not high fantasy. I'm going to go sci-fi on it, only because I don't remember there actually being magic. Oh, wait a minute. No, I take it back. So the finale of the MTV one before it moved over, there was the big battle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll go magic. I'm going to go fantasy on that one because there was legitimate. I had to rewatch it in my head real quick. And then the final battle, it's like a huge fantasy battle. There's magic bolts and shit being thrown around. Yeah, we're going fantasy. Had there not been that, I would have went the other way. But
All right.
and we didn't really even talk about the Shannara Chronicles. I never read them. It's a big book series. It's got a lot of fans.
I wanted to read it, but I never got around to it.
I felt like because I already watched the show, I kind of already knew what it was. But then I was like, I heard they really butchered it. So maybe the books are probably way better.
So they gave it the Aragon treatment?
Yeah. Oh, I think Shannara was a little bit better than Aragon.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. But
all right.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good episode. And we're just going to leave it here and not say any more words. Nobody's listening at this point anyway. All right, let's wrap this up.
All right. So, as we've said, if you're listening at this point and you have anything to add, shows, movies, books,
ideas for future episodes,
heck, criteria of what makes fantasy, leave it in the comments below on YouTube. If you're listening on Spotify or iTunes, iHeartRadio, wherever you're at,
go to Instagram or X.
You can absolutely jump over to our website, treeofgeek.com, contact us, shoot us a message about it. We'll get it in our email and we will reply.
Unless you're a fake person that just wants me to know how to promote my website.
Oh, that's my favorite.
We do get those ones.
That's my
Luke
favorite.
wants to tell you how to promote your website. That's not what I'm asking for, Luke. Luke, you give me a list and then we'll talk, buddy.
Yep. Or I like the ones
or
that
Larry
are,
or whatever his name is.
Hey, I listened to your episode. It's great, but I could help redesign your logo.
There's nothing wrong with my logo.
Okay. But yeah, hop on over, shoot us a line. If you're on YouTube, hit the like button, subscribe to us, and definitely drop a comment below. All three of those things really help with the metrics and help push us up the YouTube algorithm so that we can get seen by more people. So we really do appreciate when you help us out there. If you're really enjoying the show, you can also go over to patreon.com/Tree of Geek. For $5 a month, you can subscribe to our extra geeky tier, I guess. I don't know what you want to call it. You'll see some behind the scenes photos and comments.
You can vote on some polls.
We'll have some up that you can vote on for future episodes. Not only on like what it's going to be about, but it could be content within the episode. The more
people we get together, the more content we'll put together for it.
Yeah, and we'd love to talk. We have lots of fun ideas that we're going to start putting out this year. Maybe you'll see some reaction videos to some of the worst B-rated movies ever. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Keep pushing for it. We're going to do it.
I'm pretty sure that's going to wrap everything up. So please get a hold of us. Jump onto X, Twitter, Facebook, message us. Let us know what you think of our episodes.
Yeah, go to Buzzsprout, I guess.
All right, well,
yeah, that place.
That's a pretty good first official episode of the year. I mean, we had the intro, the future geeks of 2025, but this is our first content-driven one. I think it's going to be a good year.
I think so. I have a lot of good magical feelings inside about it. I just want to say before we leave here, normally the H train. Michael usually does some sort of choo-choo type thing, but unfortunately the train is in the station. It's being redesigned. I'm not saying it's never coming back, but right now it's getting some work done. It's in the shop, so stay tuned for some stuff in the future.
All right, well, thanks for tuning in. So from the Tree of Geek, this is Josh.
And this is Michael. Take care.